party.
Oh man, Patty Harney? She said yes and everything?
Well, no, I haven't really asked her yet, but I'm gonna.
In person?
No way. Probably just calling on the phone.
Yeah, a phone call. I think that's what I'm gonna do.
So, who you going with, Jerry?
Oh, well, see, there's this kid on my street. His name is Bill Shallcross. Well, see, he plays hockey with the brother of Rochelle Tasker, and she has gym class with Mandy Moore, and Mandy Moore has a locker next to Cheryl Berman, and Cheryl Berman's, like, really good friends with Nancy Eaton, so she's gonna ask her.
Who?
Cheryl's gonna ask Nancy. For me.
Oh, right.
Got a friend to ask for you. I think that's what I'm gonna do.
And what about you, Sheehan?
Well, I was thinking, what if you, slipped a card into a girl's notebook?
What do you mean, a card?
You know, a greeting card.
Like a Hallmark card?
Exactly.
You mean you would put it in writing?
Right.
Man, what if she hates you? She do it to everyone. You can even end up in the school newspaper.
On the girl's bathroom.
Or on the evening news.
Then evidence like that could ruin your reputation.
I don't have a reputation.
You will now.
Jenny? Putting this card in my notebook? That was really neat. I'd love to go to the dance with you.
Okay. The card. I think that's what I'm gonna do.
Hallmark Cards Incorporated. Doubtless, most of you are well aware of Hallmark, and their many, many, many cards, and stores, and movies now, actually. You know, the ones where the big-time career woman returns to her hometown and reconnects with her high school sweetheart, and they fall in love over Christmas and open a gingerbread bakery or something. Listen! We can make fun of them, but people really like these movies for whatever reason. So hey, regardless, Hallmark these days is commonly associated with the holidays, and even with their massive size, being a billion-dollar company, they're still a privately held, family-owned American company to this day, which is actually pretty impressive. Generally, when companies get to the size of Hallmark, they go public at some point, winding up on the stock market, having investors, but Hallmark is one of the exceptions. They have never done that. Still under the control of the Hall family, and their history dates back to 1907, with a company called the Norfolk Postcard Company, and a man named Joyce Clyde Hall, or J.C. Hall. J.C. was just a teenager. He was still a kid. He had brothers, but he had grown up poor. His dad had been a preacher in David City, Nebraska, and the family had never had very much money. But at the age of just 16, he decided to start selling postcards with his elder brothers, Raleigh Hall and William Hall, in Norfolk, Nebraska, where the family had recently moved. They originally headquartered the brothers were also working at, and the reason why they had gotten into postcards is that was actually a big fad at about that time. Postcards were seen as really cool novelties, and there were so many variations of postcards, so much postcard art, people were collecting postcards. It was a big thing, it was a craze. You think these kind of fads started in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s? No, you fools! People have always loved their fads, and postcards were one of those fads. So that's why the brothers got into the business. And the business was rather humble, though it was a lot of hard work for them. And eventually, they outgrew the resources of that bookstore and decided to move things over to Kansas City, Missouri. JC would find himself in Kansas City at the age of 18 with basically nothing to his name, except for 2 shoeboxes filled with postcards. He was able to sell the cards in the small towns around the city, and eventually was able to open up his own storefront in downtown, alongside his brother Raleigh, and by this time they weren't calling themselves the Norfolk Postcard Company, they were just calling themselves Hall Brothers. But they still had to work very hard to make this happen. These guys were really doing the grunt work because it didn't make money overnight. They were just getting by for a long time. And as JC would later say when interviewed about that time in his life, he said, all I was trying to do was make a living. In those days, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And I liked to eat. But by 1912, they were running into problems. See, the postcard fad had died off. They were no longer nearly as popular as they once were. I mean, they were still being sold, and, I mean, you can even get postcards now, sure. But without the fad, well, the business took a slump. So they shifted things to focus more on the holidays, particularly Christmas. They began selling what were called Christmas letters and greeting cards associated with the holiday, which did mean that a lot of their business was very seasonal, but it was still a better option to focus on that. It proved lucrative, because Christmas is Christmas, and people are always going to be buying things around Christmas. It's just the way people are. And the thing about the Hall's cards is that they were very nice and wholesome. People liked what they had to offer. They didn't invent the concept of greeting cards, to be clear, but they definitely popularized them. However, they faced another major setback in 1915 when their storefront caught fire. Yeah, this was a horrible situation. They did not have the savings to fix this. They were $17,000 in debt. But instead of giving up, they opted to double down. They took out yet another loan to invest in their own printing press, to make their own homemade product, pushing the greeting card idea. And the thing about their greeting cards is that they came in envelopes, so they were more discreet than the standard cards that had been delivered before. It was a bit like, well, wrapping paper. You know, you wrapped up the gift and then you open up, it's a card. Hey, this is nice, someone's thinking of me. You know, that kind of stuff. Little wholesome things like that are what Hallmark started becoming known for. Because the thing about cards is that, okay, yeah, they're not an expensive gift, but, you know, people don't always have the money to get something nice for somebody else. People have hard times, people have difficulties. But if someone still takes the time, makes the effort to get you a card, like, that's still a nice thought. And just the fact that they were thinking of you, took the time to send you that, well, that still means a lot. Plus, sometimes you open it and there's money inside. I love getting money inside my cards. Thanks, Grandma! Anyway, they continued forward, and the business kept growing. Now officially being called Hall Brothers Incorporated, everything kind of ballooned for them in 1917 for two reasons. One, World War I. Okay, it sounds strange that World War I would help their business, and this certainly wasn't intentional. But the thing was, people were seeking closer contact with one another, particularly their friends and relatives that were overseas, serving. Because the United States entered World War I in 1917. That's when we got involved. The war had been raging for several years at that point, but we were like, no, until that year. And then we were like, okay, fine, be that way. But because so many servicemen were going overseas, greeting cards took off. And the Hall brothers' offerings were particularly popular. And that wasn't the only thing they stumbled into that year. There was also wrapping paper. Yes, I know, we don't often think about this too much because it's wrapping paper. I mean, everyone uses wrapping paper for Christmas, like what's the deal? And birthdays, too. Well, the Halls... Okay, some sources say they invented wrapping paper. They didn't exactly invent wrapping paper, because the paper itself already existed, but they did invent the notion of using it for that purpose. See, prior to that year, traditional wrapping paper had been basically colored tissue paper, which did work, though it wasn't very sturdy and was prone to water absorption. The Halls ran out of it. They needed more, but they couldn't get any more at the time. So they wound up substituting a different kind of paper that was French in origin. There was fancier stuff that was meant to line envelopes, the inside of them, because it was smooth and silky and kind of neat. The thing about this paper is that it tore relatively easily if you tried, and it also wasn't nearly as willing to absorb water like tissue paper was. Despite this being an impromptu decision just because they ran out of what they normally would use, they found that people really liked the new paper. So they did that again the following year, and after that they started printing their own, with designs and stuff specifically designed to be wrapping paper, and now it's the modern wrapping paper we use. That's kind of what it's known for. That was a neat thing that happened. Into the 20s, things got even better for the company. In 1922, they expanded throughout the entire country, with their staff growing from 4 to 120 people. And they expanded their lineup to not just incorporate holiday cards, but also everyday greeting cards, whether it be for a sick loved one or just to say hi or give condolences. The Hall brothers started offering basically everything they possibly could, and in 1928 they introduced a new brand name, Hallmark, which was taken from the Hallmark symbol used by goldsmiths in London during the 14th century. It also had the name Hall in it, so it referenced themselves, because duh, and that name started appearing on the back of every card. The company itself wouldn't officially change their name to Hallmark for several years, but over time, they began being just known simply as Hallmark, even if the official change wouldn't happen until 1954. During the Depression, things got, well, difficult for them because it was the Great Depression and it was difficult for absolutely everybody. But JC grew up poor, remember. The whole family did. And they were still privately owned. They didn't have to worry about investor pressure. And he refused, stubbornly, to lay off any employees. He didn't think that was the right thing to do, so he simply didn't do it. And they had to limp and be careful in other areas to stay afloat during the Depression, but they were able to get through it. The business soared again during World War II for much the same reasons that World War I had helped them. And in 1944, they adopted their slogan that they still use to this day. When you care enough to send the very best. And once World War II was over, things got kind of crazy over at Hallmark. They expanded rapidly, becoming an insanely large company. In 1951, they sponsored a television program for NBC that would eventually evolve into the Hallmark Hall of Fame. It's an anthology program and is the longest-running primetime series in the history of television. Over the course of its existence, it won 80 Emmy Awards. 80 Emmys! Yo! As I mentioned, in 1954, they officially changed their name to Hallmark, and in 1958, they would acquire the William E. Coutts Company, which was a Canadian company, an affiliate of them back in 1931 that also made greeting cards. But now they were one company, though until the 90s, the Canadian branch remained known as Coutts Hallmark, referencing the history of the Canadian side of things. But Hallmark doesn't just do cards, right? They move into other stuff, and yeah, they started doing that in the 70s. JC would retire in 1966, spending the remainder of his years trying to revitalize the Kansas City downtown area, as that's where his company got its real start. His efforts resulted in places like the Crown Center, and his son, Donald Joyce Hall, would succeed him as the chairman and president of Hallmark. And under him is when they started making Christmas ornaments. That started in 1973, and I bet if you don't know Hallmark for their cards, you might definitely know them for their ornaments. Hallmark ornaments have a rich and vibrant history all on their own, resulting in a dedicated following from people. People started collecting the Hallmark ornaments because they were often very good quality, had the brand recognition, and Hallmark loved, and still does, to work with third parties and get licensing deals for all sorts of other characters. Whether they be something like Disney or Pokemon or whatever it may be, Hallmark's just like, yeah, is that a thing? Is that a piece of media people like? Yeah, we're gonna stick it on a Christmas tree. Baby Jesus is gonna love it! Part of the reason for the collection thing is that the Hallmark keepsake ornament collection, well, they're dated, and each collection is only available for 1 year, then they don't make them anymore. So every year, everyone's like, oh my god, we gotta get the latest one. It was a brilliant business tactic. Their first collection included 18 ornaments, though the more modern collections generally have more than that. During the 80s, they started getting their hands on other things too. In addition to acquiring some other card manufacturers, they also acquired Binney & Smith. Now, the thing about Binney & Smith is that they didn't actually manufacture cars necessarily. They manufactured art supplies, specifically crayons. They would later be known as Crayola LLC. Yes, that Crayola. They're owned by Hallmark. In fact, Hallmark is responsible for a few things you may not have thought of, like Rainbow Bright. Yeah, seriously, Rainbow Bright. Like, the 1980s children's show, that was a Hallmark thing. Go figure. And of course, now they have their own cable television channel, the Hallmark Channel, which I don't think I need to go into as people talk about it constantly. Though, believe it or not, it was established all the way back in 2001. And regardless, Hallmark to this day remains a very well-managed company and one commonly associated with the holiday season. I wish I could give you some kind of, dirty laundry or some kind of drama behind the scenes, but for Hallmark, at least so far, they handle themselves very well. They have humble beginning, grew into a success, and remain that way. To this day, they're still family-owned. Currently, the executive chairman is Donald Joyce Hall Jr., the grandson of J.C. and the son of Donald J. Hall, who passed away just last year. And the only ever major drama that surrounded Hallmark was mostly down to some copyright lawsuits. Neil Armstrong, yes, the astronaut Neil Armstrong, go figure, sued them in 1994 because they used his name and a recording of his quote, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," in a Christmas ornament, but without actually getting his permission. That lawsuit would wind up being settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, which Armstrong would donate to Purdue University, which he was a graduate of. Then, in 2007, Paris Hilton, yes, seriously, filed a lawsuit against Hallmark because they had produced a card called Paris's First Day as a Waitress, with a photograph of her face on a cartoon of a waitress serving a plate of food. Hallmark said that it was intended as a parody and protected under fair use law, but in the end, it was also settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Other than those two incidents, though, Hallmark has been pretty squeaky clean over the years. They've just been doing their thing, making cards, making ornaments, existing, vibing, and if you're a big fan of the holiday season, it's likely you've either purchased or received a gift that was originally made by Hallmark. Merry Christmas, everyone. Until next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a farewell.